Picture this. It's 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday night. You've got a deadline at midnight. The assignment is worth 30% of your grade. And you're currently 3 hours deep into a deep dive about whether octopuses can taste with their tentacles. No? Just me? Okay, perhaps the octopus part is specific to me. But that feeling, that specific blend of panic, self-loathing, and strange determination to learn everything about marine biology instead of doing something remotely productive, that feeling, my friends, is procrastination in its purest form. If you've ever wondered why you do this to yourself, why your brain seemingly rebels against your own best interests, why "I'll just wait until I'm in the right mood" became your life's philosophy, then welcome. You've arrived at the right place. This is What Is, and today we're going to dissect the living room elephant that's been sitting on your to-do list for the last 6 months. We're tackling procrastination, the universal experience that's simultaneously everyone's worst enemy, and somehow, inexplicably, also their comfort blanket. Before we dive in, let's acknowledge something important. If you're watching this, there's a non-zero chance you're avoiding something right now. Maybe it's homework, maybe it's work, maybe it's that pile of laundry that's developed its own ecosystem. Perhaps you've convinced yourself that watching a 20-minute video about procrastination is somehow productive procrastination itself, which technically it isn't, but we'll get to that. Procrastination is one of those words we throw around constantly, but have you ever actually stopped to consider what it really means? Not just the dictionary definition, but the lived experience, the late-night existential spiraling, the way you can suddenly become passionate about reorganizing your spice rack when a simple email would suffice. Today we're going to explore the psychology, the neuroscience, and yes, genuine useful strategies to help you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start doing things. Because spoiler alert, that perfect moment doesn't exist. It never did. And you're not lazy. You're experiencing a very human, very misunderstood phenomenon that affects everyone, from overwhelmed students to high-powered executives. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's happening in your brain when you avoid tasks, why simple willpower isn't the solution, and what actually works. And who knows, you might even get round to whatever you've been putting off. No promises though, we're not miracle workers. 1. Defining the beast. So let's start with a fundamental question. What is procrastination really? The dictionary will tell you it's the action of delaying or postponing something. But that definition, accurate as it is, misses the emotional texture of the experience. Procrastination isn't just waiting. It's an active relationship you have with your own dread. It's standing in your kitchen, staring at the sink full of dishes, and somehow deciding that reorganizing your Netflix password is a better use of your finite time on Earth. Psychologists have a more nuanced definition. Timothy Pychyl, a researcher who spent decades studying this phenomenon, defines procrastination as the voluntary delay of an intended action despite knowing that you'll be worse off for doing so. The key word there is voluntary. You're not avoiding tasks because you have a genuine obstacle. You're avoiding them despite knowing it will cost you. This distinction matters because it separates true barriers from procrastination itself. If you're not writing your essay because your computer's crashed, that's not procrastination, it's a genuine obstacle. If you're not writing your essay because suddenly reorganizing your digital musical library seems like the most compelling thing anyone has ever suggested, congratulations, you're procrastinating. The experience itself follows a pretty predictable pattern, and if you've ever been there, you know it well. It starts with the task. Maybe it's something unpleasant, maybe it's overwhelming, or maybe just there. Immediately, your brain begins searching for alternatives. I should really clean my room first. I work better when I'm hungry. I'll be more focused after I take a quick nap. Each excuse feels reasonable in the moment, logical even. Only in retrospect do you recognize them for what they were, elaborate cons your brain ran out itself. And here's where it gets interesting. Procrastination isn't actually about time management. Despite what every productivity guru and their mother might tell you, it's about emotional regulation. You're not putting off your work because you don't have enough hours in the day. You're putting it off because dealing with the negative emotions the task evokes feels unbearable in that moment. The task makes you feel anxious, or bored, or overwhelmed, or doubtful of your abilities. And your brain, in its infinite wisdom, decides anything, even nothing, is better than sitting with those feelings. So you clean instead, or nap, or fall into an internet rabbit hole about whether octopuses can taste with their tentacles. Because at least that feels like a choice, whereas the task feels like a trap. 2. The science of why we do this. Now here's where we get into the really fascinating stuff. Why does your brain do this to you? What biological mechanism is operating when you're 3 hours into reorganizing your spice rack instead of answering emails? The answer lies in the eternal battle between two systems in your brain. Psychologists call them System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, intuitive, and emotional. It's looking for immediate gratification, quick rewards, and a path of least resistance. System 2 is slower, more deliberate, and logical. It's the part of you that knows you should do the work, that understands long-term consequences, and can delay gratification when necessary. When you procrastinate, System 1 is winning. It's running the show. And honestly, can you blame it? System 1 is basically a toddler who wants a cookie now and doesn't care about tomorrow's consequences. Meanwhile, System 2 is that parent trying to explain why vegetables are important while the toddler is having a full meltdown in the supermarket. The prefrontal cortex, that rational, planning-orientated part of your brain, is supposed to help you resist immediate temptations in favor of long-term goals. But here's the thing. The prefrontal cortex is also highly sensitive to negative emotions. When a task makes you feel anxious, bored, or threatened, your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for processing fear and stress, starts sounding the alarm. And when the alarm goes off, your prefrontal cortex basically throws up its hands and says, you know what, I'll just not. This is why willpower alone doesn't work. You're not fighting a lack of discipline, you're fighting a neurological response to negative emotion. And you can't think your way out of a brain state. There's also the matter of temporal discounting, that tendency to value immediate rewards more heavily than future ones. When you're contemplating doing your taxes, your brain isn't really processing, this will take 3 hours and then it'll be done. Instead, it's fixated on the immediate discomfort of sitting down and doing it. The future benefit of being finished feels abstract and distant. The immediate discomfort is right there, staring you in the face. So your brain does what evolution designed it to do, pursues the path of least resistance. Not because you're weak or lazy, but because your brain is operating exactly as it was designed to operate in many respects. The challenge is that our modern world is full of tasks that trigger this ancient system, but we don't have any ancient solutions. Your ancestors didn't have to file quarterly tax reports, and their brains weren't prepared for it. Alright, before we go any further, if you're finding this helpful, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button. We're diving into the types of procrastination next, and I promise there's more where this came from. Also, if you've ever procrastinated so hard that you learned an absurd amount about something completely random, leave a comment. I want to hear your octopus level deep dives or spice rack reorganizations. No judgment here. 3. The many faces of procrastination. Now that we understand what's happening biologically, let's talk about the fact that procrastination doesn't look the same for everyone. In fact, researchers have identified several distinct types, and understanding which one applies to you can be incredibly useful. The first type is what we might call the perfectionist procrastinator. This person isn't avoiding work because they don't want to do it, they're avoiding it because they want to do it perfectly, and they're terrified that they won't. So they keep preparing, researching, planning, getting everything just right before they start. But of course, just right never arrives, because they're never actually starting. The perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect mood. These become moving targets that recede further into the distance the more you chase them. Ironically, this form of procrastination is often disguised as productivity. The perfectionist procrastinator looks like they're working. They're taking notes, making lists, organizing their environment, but all of this preparation never quite graduates into actually doing. It's a sophisticated avoidance mechanism, and it can be hard to recognize because it feels so responsible. The second type is the dreamer procrastinator. This is the person that has big visions, grand plans, and endless ideas. They have 5 businesses they want to start, 12 books they want to write, and a vision board that could wallpaper a small room. But none of these things ever actually manifest, because dreaming about them feels so much better than doing the mundane work to make them real. The planning is fun, the execution is hard, and so they stay in the dream phase forever, always starting tomorrow. Then there's the crisis maker procrastinator, who genuinely believes that they work best under pressure. This person waits until the absolute last minute and then crams with manic energy. They might actually produce decent work, and they might wear their last minute status as a badge of honor. I'm just a deadline person, they say. I need the adrenaline. But here's what's really happening. Crisis makers have usually found that emergency stress does in fact override their avoidance mechanisms. When the deadline is truly imminent, the pain of not doing the task becomes greater than the pain of doing it. So they finally start. The problem is that this approach is exhausting, it's inconsistent, and it leaves no room for unexpected complications. What happens when the crisis is bigger than the deadline? What happens when life actually gets in the way? The system only works as long as the artificial emergency is more frightening than the task itself. Finally, there's the avoidant procrastinator, who procrastinate specifically because they're afraid of someone else's reaction to their work. They'd rather not submit anything at all than submit something that might be criticized. It's a form of self-sabotage that protects their self-image. If they never finish, no one can judge the quality. The incomplete project remains a project full of potential. The finished project is vulnerable. It can be evaluated, criticized, found wanting. 4. The cost. We should talk about what procrastination actually costs you, because it's easy to minimize. It's fine, you might tell yourself. I'll always get it done eventually. It's not a big deal. But research tells a different story. Chronic procrastination is associated with higher levels of stress, lower immune function, and greater susceptibility to illness. Your body is literally suffering from the sustained activation of your stress response system. When you're perpetually behind, perpetually rushed, perpetually playing catch-up, your cortisol levels remain elevated in ways that compromise your health over time. Then there's also the academic and professional cost. Yes, you might eventually turn in your assignment, but at what quality? And at what cost to everything else in your life? Procrastinators often exist in a state of perpetual crisis, which means they're always handling emergencies, never investing in deeper work, relationships, or personal growth. They're surviving instead of thriving. The social costs are real too. When you're always frazzled, always late, always cramming, you're not showing up as your best self for the people in your life. You might cancel plans because you're behind. You might be distracted in conversations because you're mentally racing through your to-do list. You might resent the people who seem to have it all together, not realizing that what they have is simply a different relationship with their own avoidance. And then there's the internal cost, which might be the heaviest of all. Every time you procrastinate, you're sending a message to yourself. I can't trust myself. I can't do what I say I'm going to do. I'm someone who doesn't follow through. Over time, these messages become your identity. You start to believe that you're fundamentally unreliable, that you're just a procrastinator, as if it's an immutable personality trait rather than a set of behaviors you could, with effort, change. 5. What actually works? Alright, we've established that procrastination is widespread, scientifically explainable, and genuinely harmful. Now here's the question you've been waiting for. How do you actually stop? First, some tough love. There's no app, no hack, no productivity system that will cure you overnight. If you're looking for a magic bullet, you're going to be disappointed. The research is clear on this. The only way to change procrastination long term is to change your relationship with the negative emotions that trigger it in the first place. You have to learn to tolerate discomfort, uncertainty, and imperfection. You have to sit with the feelings you'd rather avoid. That said, there are concrete strategies that can help. The first is what psychologists call implementation intentions. These are specific if-then plans that link situations to your behavior. Not, I'll work on my essay tomorrow, but when I sit at my desk at 9 a.m., I will open my essay document and I will write for 15 minutes at least. The more specific, the better. When exactly will you do the thing? Where will you be? What will you do first? This removes the decision from the moment. You won't have to summon the willpower because you've already decided in advance when the behavior will happen. The second strategy is to make the task smaller. Not the task itself. I'm not saying do a worse job. I'm saying commit to a smaller version of the task. Don't commit to writing a whole chapter. Commit to writing for 10 minutes. Don't commit to cleaning the entire house. Commit to cleaning for 15 minutes. The point is to get started, because starting is usually the hardest part. Once you've begun, momentum takes over. Your brain stops resisting something you've already started doing. This is related to a concept called activation energy, the initial push required to start a task. By lowering the bar for starting, you reduce the activation energy required. You're not asking yourself to write an essay, you're just asking yourself to sit down and write something, anything, for 10 minutes. That feels doable, that feels survivable, and once you're doing it, you're probably going to keep going. The third strategy is self-compassion, and this is the one that might be most counterintuitive. Research shows that beating yourself up for procrastinating actually makes it worse. When you shame yourself, you're adding more negative emotions to an experience that's already driven by negative emotion. You're increasing the very thing you're trying to avoid. People who practice self-compassion, who treat themselves with kindness when they fail, procrastinate less, not more. When you mess up, say something to yourself like you would say to a friend. Okay, that didn't go as planned. That makes sense. How can I move forward? The fourth strategy is commitment devices and environmental design. These are external structures that make productive choices easier and the unproductive choice harder. If you can't resist checking your phone, leave it in another room while you work. If you can't stop going on social media, use an app blocker. If you can't resist the temptation of your bed, work somewhere else. You don't have to trust your willpower because you've engineered your environment so that willpower isn't required. Finally, and perhaps the most importantly, you need to address the underlying emotions. If a task consistently makes you feel overwhelmed, break it down until it doesn't. If it makes you feel inadequate, remind yourself that you don't have to be perfect, you just have to finish. If it makes you feel bored, find a way to add some challenge or variety. You're not a machine that can be reprogrammed with the right instructions. You're a human with emotions that matter, and those emotions are trying to tell you something. Listen to them, even when, or especially when, they're telling you things you don't want to hear. So where does this leave us? Procrastination is not a character flaw. It's not a sign that you're lazy, untalented, or fundamentally broken. It's a coping mechanism, one that evolved for good reasons, but backfires in the modern world. It exists because you're trying to avoid negative emotions, and understanding that is the first step towards changing it. So next time you find yourself in a deep Wikipedia spiral at 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday night, you can recognize it for what it is. Your brain is avoiding discomfort, and now you have a choice. You can keep avoiding, or you can take a breath, start small, and prove to yourself that you're more than just your worst impulses. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to start. Thank you for watching What Is. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more. Share it with someone you know who's currently avoiding something important. And if you're out there reorganizing your spice rack instead of watching this, we see you, we understand, and we'll be here when you're ready. Until then, I'm heading to clean my desk for the third time this week. If you made it to the end of this video, congratulations. You just procrastinated by watching a video about procrastination, which is either deeply ironic or surprisingly meta, depending on how you look at it. Either way, we're glad you're here. If you want more content like this, deep dives into the concepts that shape our lives, explained in ways that actually make sense, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Also, if you're feeling inspired or still avoiding something, check out our other videos. We've got plenty more where this came from. And one more thing, if this video resonated with you, drop us a comment. Tell me what you've been putting off, or tell me about your octopus level deep dives. I read every comment, and you might just inspire someone else to finally start what they've been avoiding. So until next time, start small, be kind to yourself, and remember, the perfect moment does not exist. The only moment you have is this one. See you next time.